We're so glad you've joined us on the ERLC podcast to explore how the Bible addresses important cultural issues pertaining to life, religious liberty, marriage and family, and human dignity, and how we can walk in wisdom for God's glory and for the flourishing of our neighbors. If you're enjoying this podcast and find it helpful, please leave a review wherever you listen. This will help more people find and benefit from what we're learning together. We are grateful for the time you take to join us for these conversations.
You're listening to the ERLC podcast. Well, can you hear me now, or is it still very delayed?
The delay is so long, it actually doesn't make sense to do FaceTime. I mean, epic. It is so long. Actually, no, Lindsay, you're alive.
What?
When your face moves, it matches up with FaceTime. It's Josh that is, his FaceTime
Superior
is the slow.
internet over here.
Fascinating.
Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of the ERLC podcast, where each week we're talking about our work here at the ERLC and focusing on what Christians need to know about the things going on in the world. I'm Josh Wester, and with me on the podcast today are my co-hosts, Lindsay Nicolay.
Heidi-ho, neighbors.
And Brent Leatherwood.
Man, it is so good to be back with y'all.
Guys, it is good to be back. I've been on vacation. Yeah, man, I've been on vacation for the last several days at the Outer Banks of North Carolina. It's been really fantastic and excited to get in today's show. We're going to be talking to our colleague, Palmer Williams, later on as our special guest. But Lindsay, go ahead and tell us what the ERLC has been talking about this week.
Before we get to our content on ERLC.com, I just want to take a minute and let listeners know about our two newsletters that we have, Highlights and the Weekly. You can go to our website at ERLC.com and scroll down to the Stay Connected bar. There you can choose Highlights or the Weekly or both, enter your name and your email, and hit the subscribe button. Okay, so right off the bat, we actually have a really exciting piece by Palmer Williams where she explains a comprehensive pro-life bill, just one-of-a-kind pro-life bill. It's really an historic bill that he signed this past week. Now, it's important to mention, and I'm sure Josh or Brent will address this in just a minute, that it's not without opposition. So there's a temporary restraining order that has been issued that's halted the implementation of it. But Palmer, in her article, she talks about what makes this bill unique, and she goes through several of the notable elements and the requirements that abortion doctors have to meet as far as performing an ultrasound. She also goes through and talks about the abortion restrictions at each stage, which really are incredible. And Palmer quoted Governor Lee, and he said when he signed this bill, life is precious and everything that is precious is worth protecting. And so we are just thankful that this governor is taking a stand for life in all ages and stages. And we're thankful that Palmer covered this important piece.
I'm so thankful for this piece, and I am personally just so excited that this is now the law of the land in Tennessee. So, for folks who have been listening for a while, you may remember that I've talked at various points about my previous roles over in the political world with the Tennessee legislature and running the Tennessee Republican Party. And I had a front row seat towards many of the efforts that led to the ability for this law to be written in the legislature and now passed into law and signed by the governor. In many ways, this represents the culmination of years of effort by dedicated pro-life activists, by Christians who were advocating for the dignity of the preborn. This, without a doubt, I mean, when you survey the land across the country, this represents the most all-encompassing pro-life legislation in the country now. And for so long, Tennessee was seen as kind of this abortion destination in the South. And this law is going to change that. Countless lives are very likely to be saved because this is now the law in Tennessee. And so I'm really thankful that Palmer got us up to speed on this. I'm so thankful for all the years of effort that went into this. And I'm really grateful that Governor Bill Lee has signed this into law. And yes, as you mentioned, Lindsay, about 20 minutes after he signed it, the ACLU filed an injunction to prevent it from taking effect. And so it will be in court relatively soon and adjudicated, and hopefully this will be done away with so it can actually take effect.
Yeah, we can certainly be praying that way. And Brent, you did make a good point. And to use a scripture analogy, over the years, there have been many who have been planting seed and watering it. And so this is a collective effort of many, many people. So we're very thankful. So next up, we have a piece.
Wait. Lindsay?
Yes?
So I would be remiss if I didn't just take a moment and ask you. So in your monologue there to begin this, you said an historic achievement, I believe.
Yeah,
For
I think
me,
that's
it's always
proper.
been a historic achievement. Because it is an H, and you actually pronounce the H. You don't pronounce it I with an I. So I'm curious. Give me your AP style book background on that for our listeners, because I need to know as well.
Well,
it's definitely A. If you were British, you could say an, because they don't say the H, they say historic. And so the an comes before the vowel. But because H is not a vowel, that's why we say historic and ahistoric.
Yeah, I know, but it had been an before.
It was an before.
But it has been an.
Well, here you go. Josh, that's a really helpful explanation from that kind of British background. So, Lindsay's, married last name is Nicolay, so that's French, and her maiden name is Swartz, so that's not British either. So I actually have no idea where you got that, Lindsay.
Listen, in 1869, ahistoric and anhistoric were neck and neck as far as usage, according to the interwebs, and so that's what I'm going with. It makes me sound more sophisticated. So next up on our list of articles, we have an article by my former boss, Dan Darling, who is now at the National Religious Broadcasters. But he has a new book coming out about the way that we interact online and how we should be using our words. And he is definitely a man that applies this. But he talks about 4 ways we can apply scripture to online engagement. And they are things that we know if you've been in the church for a while, but there are things that are impossible to implement apart from the Holy Spirit. And it's especially more difficult when you have social media just at your fingertips, and we oftentimes don't think through what we're saying. So the 4 points he makes: be slow to speak, be measured, be accountable, be reasonable. And again, Dan lives these things out. And so I would highly recommend that you check out his book too. He's not paying me for it, but he does have 4 kids that need to go to college one day. So you can help him with that. But very helpful, very timely, especially in our day and age. Finally, we have a piece by Gabriel Stovall, and this piece is about Send Relief. And you might not know this, but this Sunday is Send Relief Sunday. And Send Relief is a mobilization arm. Thank you, behind the scenes, Megan Smith, for that term, of the North American Mission Board, that is so important because it focuses on serving people, being the hands and feet of Christ to people, meeting their tangible needs in order that we can serve their spiritual needs as well and bring them the hope of the gospel. So Gabriel brings us a piece titled "How You Can Serve Your Community During a Pandemic." Send Relief encourages Southern Baptists to make a difference through compassionate care. And if there has ever been a time for us to show compassionate care, it surely is right now. And so he gives a few easy and even quick ways that we can serve people, that we can involve families, we can involve children, we can involve our churches. And I know it's hard right now because we don't fully understand how we can serve people, and we're all pretty much huddled in our houses. But that's why this piece is so helpful. And this piece just highlights why we as a convention should be so thankful for NAM and for Send Relief, and for how Southern Baptists are largely known for the way that we serve in the midst of crisis.
That's so good, Lindsay. And, one of the best questions I think that any church or ministry can ask themselves are, like, if we were to close our doors tomorrow and disappear from our community, who would miss us? Like, what difference would that make? And in terms of emergency response and disaster relief, that is one of the ways the Southern Baptists have for decades served their communities and met real needs. And so just even in this time of pandemic, NAM is still trying to lead the way in providing ways for Southern Baptists to serve others who find themselves in need during this time.
That's true, Josh. And so we would encourage you, within this article, you can go to sendrelief.org. There's a link there, easy access for you to be able to look at Send Relief, check them out, and find out ways that you can serve. So we have a lot of other great content on our site this week, but these are just a few of the pieces that I wanted to highlight. So Josh and Brent, that's your look at ERLC.com.
Hey, thanks, Lindsay. And that takes us to our culture section for the week. So Brent, tell us what's going on.
What is going on in California? Like that's the question of the week. It seems like on the evangelical Twitter, is it not?
It definitely is, and not just this week, but for
weeks.
You've been on the Outer Banks. That's always the question of what's going on.
I was going to say,
what's going on in California?
You've been on the outer. Is it on the Outer Banks? Is that how you? Is that the proper usage there?
I think they would use on or at.
Okay, at the Outer Banks. Okay, because you wouldn't say like I've been on Chattanooga,
You could be on Jockey's Ridge, though. So there's that.
I guess there you go. Okay. All right. So what is going on in California? Okay. So we all know that California early on over in the West Coast was a major center of the outbreak here in America with regard to the coronavirus. And in a number of different ways, Governor Gavin Newsom, who's the governor of the Golden State, he got a lot of plaudits for his handling of it very early on. As a matter of fact, over in California, they were able to flatten the curve. However, as reopening has occurred, cases have started to rise exponentially. So in response to those increasing rates around the state, Governor Newsom announced this week that indoor operations would need to cease for restaurants, wineries, movie theaters, family entertainment establishments, even zoos and museums. And then in 30 counties, mainly in the southern portion of the state, indoor operations would need to cease for fitness centers, offices for non-essential services, personal care services, hair salons, barbershops, and churches and places of worship. Needless to say, this has caused an outcry in the state. And so it's another collision of church and state at the local level.
Well, I can imagine because, we're starting to experience this here in our home state of Tennessee, where we're having some backtracking from what things have started to open, that it's got to be frustrating for people in California, because you have the first couple weeks of this going on that you were probably running off of adrenaline. It was something new and not exciting, but it was new. It's like camp or something. And then after a couple months of this, and you're hoping to reopen again, and then you start to reopen, and then everything gets pulled back. And I read a tweet, not by an expert, but he said, I have a feeling that this first 4 months were just rehearsal for the real play that's about to take place, which I hope is not true. But all that to say, I can understand that there's controversy going on because it has got to be a highly emotional, highly frustrating time right now.
Right. And, my heart goes out to, specifically for our churches that are in California, that are in these 30 counties. Just the emotional roller coaster of, moving to online and then probably some sort of phased reopening and then thinking maybe we're going to get back to some sense of normalcy. And now to say, hey, you got to move back outdoor or online if you're going to continue that. That has got to be so frustrating. I completely understand. And then, honestly, more importantly, the folks that need the community that comes with in-person worship, those folks just are by the wayside. And this is such a season of sacrifice for so many of us across the country. It just seems particularly pointed here in California.
And Brent, one of the things you mentioned, sacrifice, and it is true. We're having to sacrifice what we've known being Christians in America, but this time Also, just my mind keeps going again and again to the persecuted church and how in other countries, like they would just long to be able to meet together, or even to have the luxury to meet outside in an open field together without fear of retribution. And so I just think this is not fun, and this is not pleasant, and this doesn't belittle any of the suffering that's happening. But goodness, we're just kind of where we're used to being consumers in America in the church. We're just beginning to understand maybe what sacrifice means and what following Christ means when conditions are not ideal.
Lindsay, I think that's really good. This whole situation has been so difficult because, number one, none of us have ever lived through anything like this before. And we're all trying to find our way. Our work at the ERLC focuses on religious liberty, and there have been tons of questions that have come up in recent months about the religious liberty implications, and sometimes overstepping on behalf of local governments, on state governments, trying to find their way to best safeguard and protect public health, and how the interplay between church and state, and that has created a lot of questions. I know recently in California, one of the big points of tension has been over whether or not churches would be allowed to sing as they are conducting their worship services. And there's been a lot of back and forth online about that. The problem with this particular situation, like many others, is that it's just way more complicated than a simple churches have a right to sing. It's a religious liberty issue. Like in the midst of the pandemic, we are really trying to balance these considerations. And we know there is plenty of data that shows us that when churches have gathered together for singing, or in instances where there have been choirs, in other cases, it has led to more spread with the virus. And that's something that we know for sure. So when we're thinking about what the state should do in terms of guidance for churches, or even in terms of mandates for churches, this is an incredibly complex thing. Not to mention the fact that, we're located in, Nashville, Tennessee. We have an office in DC, but we are connected to pastors and Christian leaders on the ground in all 50 states. And especially in California, those are the people that we've been leaning in and talking to find out how this is being received, where they are. And the truth is that there are an overwhelming number of pastors who recognize the need in a way that people who don't live in the state of California, where there is not such a spread of infection, it doesn't resonate with them in the same way. And so while we want to be incredibly cautious, and we want to see our brothers and sisters in California and elsewhere be able to resume everything that looks like returning to normal as soon as possible, the truth is that we're doing everything we can to try to help churches minister effectively, and to be in conversation and take action where needed to push back against government overreach. But with what we're navigating here, or seeing here in California, it's just, my word for that would just be, it's just much more complicated than a simple black and white, this is a religious liberty thing or not.
Josh, that's really good. And as a matter of fact, we will link in the show notes. There was a Baptist Press article that interviewed several folks in California about the situation there. One of the individuals that they talked with was Roland Slade. He is the new executive committee trustee chairman. So he is one of the leading figures in the Southern Baptist Convention. And there was a line in his quote to Baptist Press that really struck me. He said, "It doesn't sound like Governor Newsom is talking with anyone in the faith community, or really knows anyone." And that's really sad to me. And I would hope that Governor Newsom and his staff are actively reaching out and trying to cultivate relationships with folks who are faith leaders, so that they can understand our perspective as people of faith, and then also help communicate what the rationale is for their decisions. Because, look, if you're being uncharitable, you could say, look, none of these seem to make sense, and this just seems to be all completely inconsistent. And look, these last 6 months have been such a roller coaster. I could see why any folks would arrive at that conclusion. But when you have someone out there like Pastor Slade, or, we've got trustee members from the ERLC that pastor in California. When you've got leaders like this of such a big denomination like the Southern Baptist Convention, I would hope you are utilizing them as resources to understand why Christians, why the broader faith community has concerns about this. And I'll say, I have reached out now in my role at the ERLC to Governor Newsom's chief of staff, asking for some clarity on the singing guidance that you mentioned earlier, Josh, and also just kind of re-upping with their team. Hey, it would be good for us to really have a conversation that I think could be helpful, both in providing clarity for us and clarity for them. Hopefully, it's not like Pastor Slade was saying, that they're not wanting to listen. And hopefully it's just that they are very busy trying to produce guidance that protects their citizens from this virus. So that's a lot on California, but I hope folks understand we are working in the midst of this to try and create bridges of communication between us in the Southern Baptist world and with civic leaders like Gavin Newsom. Well, listen, that sound you hear may be parents screaming inside their hearts, because a new study was released from Israel showing their experience with schools reopening. So it was reported this week that on June 3rd, 2 weeks after schools reopened, more than 244 students and staff were found to test positive for the virus. According to the Israeli Education Ministry, 2,026 students, teachers, and staff have now contracted the virus, and 28,000 are in quarantine due to possible exposure. That is an alarming number. You have to remember, Israel is a relatively small country, relatively small population, particularly as it relates to America. And these results seem to suggest that they're having some adverse effects with reopening schools, which is just around the corner here in the States.
How badly are you screaming in your heart right now, Brent?
Oh, it's deafening. Yeah, we just got the plans for our schools reopening.
I think I noticed your hair like turning gray in real time here on FaceTime while we're recording, just by talking about it.
It's turning gray, and probably by the time that school is supposed to begin in about 4 weeks, it will have completely fallen out.
That would be a tragedy.
This is going to be this is going to be a giant social experiment here in America. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to this. But as you said earlier, Lindsay, this is when the real play begins. Everything else has just been dress rehearsal. All right. So while we're on the coronavirus front, I thought this CNBC report was pretty interesting. Facebook has announced it will launch a new section of its social network dedicated solely to dispelling inaccurate myths about coronavirus. Makes me think they're going to take down some conspiracy theories that might even be out there.
What does that mean? Like, do they have a special team that has special insight into all the accurate articles about the coronavirus, since it's such a moving target?
Well, I would imagine that it's going to involve a bank of fact checkers who are out there trying to put out the latest that we know about coronavirus. And we should point out, what we know about coronavirus has changed. In some cases, done a 180 from what we knew previously about the virus. But I think in the main, this could be a productive exercise because Facebook has almost 3 billion users and has taken steps to stop the spread of misinformation about the virus. So hopefully this will be something that folks find helpful. All right, so domestically, let's look at the world of politics. So we were all excited a while ago, last week, when Kanye West announced he was running for president of the United States. And that's now over. Kanye West is pulling out of the race for the White House.
Which absolutely dashed the hopes of our former colleague and friend, Andrew T. Walker, who is a Kanye enthusiast. I mean, he's no Elon Musk, but in the hierarchy of Kanye fandom, I think that, Andrew is up there. And so I know he is deeply, deeply saddened to see Kanye exit so quickly the race.
That's right. And I know that Dr. Walker was angling for that plum job of, was it Minister of Culture in the Yee administration?
I think that's right.
That's right. But if you're in Oklahoma, if you're a listener in Oklahoma to this podcast, the flagship podcast of the ERLC, if you're in Oklahoma, apparently you will have the opportunity to cast your vote for Kanye West for president. This is according to the latest reporting from one Jonah Goldberg on Twitter, which is always known for its accurate information, but Jonah, I do consider pretty accurate. And needless to say, if you're in the Sooner state, get your Kanye bumper stickers ready. So anyways, well, the reason, actually, there is a reason that maybe Kanye West did decide to pull out, because apparently he has already missed the voter registration deadline in multiple states. And so his filing deadline actually for the presidency is passed. And so that certainly could hurt his chances. Elsewhere, political world, the Republican National Committee is planning to sharply limit attendance for its convention next month in Jacksonville, Florida, hometown of one
Whoop, whoop.
Lindsay Nicolay. There you go. That will have the effect of shrinking the event that President Donald Trump was planning to host there in Jacksonville. Party Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel, who is overseeing planning for the convention, has written a letter to RNC members saying that attendance for the first 3 nights of the 4-night event will be limited to delegates only. And as a reminder, conventions are typically attended by not just delegates, but party staffers, activists for the party, and it usually hosts several thousands of people. And that doesn't look like that's going to be the case.
Well, it's important to remember, too, that it's happening in the midst of a state that is quickly becoming the epicenter of the coronavirus. My mom has friends that she checks in with in Florida, and they say it's kind of wild right now. And so it'll be interesting to see the aftermath of that.
That's right. And you're right. This week, South Florida was categorized as the epicenter of the outbreak here in the United States. And so ultimately, we want to praise them because this seems like a wise move given that context of the virus. To limit folks coming in, and obviously we want the political process to continue playing out the way that it should. But this actually seems like a pretty smart move on behalf of the RNC. Okay, so on the international front, I think this is something that we will probably be able to provide some content on. The BBC is reporting that the world is ill prepared for the global crash in children being born, which is set to have a, quote, jaw-dropping impact on societies, say researchers. Falling fertility rates mean nearly every country could have shrinking populations by the end of the century. That's amazing.
Look, that data is, honestly, it's not surprising, but it is devastating to see that, dropping fertility rates actually represent way more than just the kind of top line, oh, we're having less children. It actually says a lot about the state of society and about the integrity of families and about the value of children in people's lives. And so this is something that it is stunning, but it's also deeply depressing.
That's right. So scientifically, what the researchers say is that if the fertility rate number falls below approximately 2.1, then the size of the population starts to fall. What they are projecting by the end of the century is a rate of 1.7. That actually is going to lead to a pretty dramatic decline in the population globally. Okay, on the pop culture front, Ford is releasing 3 new versions of the classic Ford Bronco. There will be the 2021 Bronco and Bronco Sport. So you'll have a 4-door option, a 2-door option, and a mini ute option. This actually took the car world by storm this week. I was actually fairly excited about it.
Yeah, I saw that, Brent. And honestly, among the people that I've been around, I've heard really mixed reviews. Some people have thought it looked really incredible. And even some of the stuff I saw on social media, people were really all about it. And then particularly women, I've heard a lot of, oh my gosh, who would ever drive that? So
I think they look pretty sweet. All right. And so finally, kind of on the fun front, our field reporter out there, Megan Smith, she highlighted this one. And honestly, I was pretty complexed about it because I don't understand the kids these days on the interwebs. But Good Morning America.
Did you say you're pretty complexed? Not perplexed or,
I was going to
confused?
call him out on it, but whatever. Keep it in there, Gary. I'll take it out.
Complex?
You say I was pretty complexed about it.
California.
I need a cake link.
Complex.
Cake.
Complex.
Cake
Complex.
objects. What do I type in?
All right. Good Morning America reported this week that distinguishing pastries made of layers of sponge and frosting from other inanimate objects has seemingly always been a piece of cake. But Twitter and TikTok users are eating up a new viral trend, sharing reactions to hyper-realistic cake-cutting videos that shock viewers when it's revealed that an everyday object was in fact a cake. I definitely do not understand the kids on the social medias these days.
I just have to say, I want my cake to look like a cake. So if my cake looks like an eggplant, as I was just scrolling and seeing, I'm less likely to enjoy it.
You're just traditional in that way, Lindsay. You're just classy.
I guess so.
Yeah, but I'm with Brent. I have no idea what these internet fads are about. And honestly, it makes me feel so old because I don't even want to appreciate them. I just want them to go away. I just feel like a, crotchety old man.
Yeah. Well, these days, we all have a lot of time on our hands. And I feel like this is just a, manifestation of that reality. All right. So, Lindsay, Josh, that's your look at this week in culture.
Now we're about to talk to our friend and colleague, Palmer Williams. Palmer is an attorney and an adoption advocate, and she is instrumental to our efforts here at the ERLC, and we're excited to talk to her today. So Palmer, we just want to say thanks so much for joining us. We're excited to talk to you today. And as we get started, would you tell us how you're serving in ministry right now? And also, what is one thing that God is teaching you in this season of life and ministry?
Sure. So I'm thankful I get to work with the ERLC, and that is a really fun part of my ministry. I do legal and policy analysis for any issues that involve those two things at the ERLC. So whether it's pro-life or are tackling sexual abuse within the SBC or any of our big Supreme Court cases that are coming down from Capitol Hill. So I love getting to do that and walk alongside the ERLC in that ministry. But then on a personal level, I am teaching a Bible study at my church in Nashville, and Lindsay is actually in it. So she can tell you how it is. But
so good.
Good. Well, it's been so fun to get to just sit and open the word with ladies at our church. We've been going, this past year we went through Joshua and Judges. So we started on one of the darkest books, Judges, in January, because the Lord has a funny sense of humor, and also knew that's what we needed, was just to see a dark period in the Bible and be able to glean what does it look like to be in a hard season for the world. So it's been such an honor to get to do that and walk alongside my sisters at our church. I'm sure that, like many of y'all, schedules pre-COVID were just insane and not sustainable and not healthy. And the Lord just kind of grinded us all to a halt. And that has been such a blessing for our family to have our schedules cleared and to be able to just spend time together and to realize how important being faithful in the monotonous every day. I have 3 little boys who are 5, 3, and 1. And so we do a lot of the same things over and over again. And the Lord is teaching me that being faithful in those little moments and in the days that look the same is so important. And it's where He really shapes our character. And so I'm thankful for that. It's not always easy, but it is a lot of fun.
Such a good lesson, Palmer. And that's one of my favorite parts of this interview time, when we ask people what God is teaching them. It's just good to hear and good to be reminded of. So this podcast focuses on culture and what's happening around us. And we had a big cultural moment in Tennessee this week. And we actually discussed earlier on the podcast the article that you wrote about, or the article you wrote about this amazing pro-life bill that was signed by Tennessee's governor. So can you tell us what excites you about this bill, and maybe give us some insight into what the temporary restraining order might mean for the future of the bill?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a really neat bill. It's innovative. It's comprehensive. I haven't seen a bill in any other state like it. We definitely, I'm in Tennessee, so I get to say we, because I'm really proud of our governor and our legislature for passing this. We did model it after a law in Missouri, which created and pioneered this, what they call the ladder provision. And I think it's a really neat, I know it sounds super nerdy and can get kind of in the weeds of the law, but basically it means that if the court strikes down part of the law of being too expansive based on the gestational age of the baby, anytime they peel back the law can still stand because it has what's called a severability clause. It means that part of the law can be taken away, it can be severed, but the law itself can still stand. So I think that is a really neat and important part of the law. I also love that it bans abortion because of the sex or race or disability of the preborn child. And this is huge language to protect the dignity and to protect against discrimination based on sex, race, or disability, which we know is so important. And especially in seeing so many children with Down syndrome being aborted, this law would not allow you to be able to do that again. And I think that is really, really important. When it comes to the temporary restraining order, so in early June, when the Senate passed the bill, Planned Parenthood and the ACLU and a couple other abortion rights groups filed a suit against the bill in federal court here in Nashville. And so as soon as the governor signed the bill, a judge was asked to issue a restraining order, a temporary restraining order, to delay the implementation of the ban. And he did that. And there'll be another... the restraining order goes through July 27th. There'll be another hearing on July 24th to see whether there can be what's called a preliminary injunction, which would basically just stop the rollout of the bill and extend that restraining order until the courts can rule on whether the law is constitutional or not. This was very expected. We've seen this sort of pattern throughout the country. And so we're hopeful that the courts will rule in our favor and say that this law is actually protecting life. But we'll see. We will just continue to pray that this really neat bill can go into effect in Tennessee.
That's right. We definitely will be praying for wisdom for this to come to a very quick resolution, and for just some sanity, honestly, to be reintroduced into this conversation, because our society has got to stop not recognizing the dignity of our preborn children. And so I am so thankful for your efforts, for the efforts of some really good friends in the administration, and of course of Governor Lee, for stewarding this forward and getting this signed into law. And so I hope you hear my just level of appreciation for you, Palmer, on this. Okay, so speaking of, you are a tireless advocate for life, all ages and stages. How did you develop this passion, Palmer, for advocating for the dignity of all people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually I have a disability. I am a paraplegic. I was in a car accident when I was 8 years old. And so I've lived the last 25 years of my life in a chair. And I think having that accident at such a young age really gave me a literal and figurative new perspective on life. And I've gotten to see what it looks like to be counted out or treated as less than because of my abilities. And so I've experienced what it can look like when dignity isn't offered to our fellow image bearers. And I think that was the first start of, okay, what does it mean to truly, that we all bear the Imago Dei, and how can we uphold that for our fellow image bearers? And so that kind of was the start, I think, the impetus of what got me excited about life and protecting it. I think, I went to a secular university, and I got to experience a lot of different perspectives on life, and at every turn, the gospel and the message of hope and dignity that it portrays to us, I think, was shown in the darkness. And it reminded me every time I was confronted with someone who didn't share that same worldview. I saw the smallness and the hurt that it brought. And so I love that, I think being pro-life and getting to advocate for human dignity brings others out of the shadow, and it brings wholeness to a broken world. And so that's kind of what has always sustained me and helped me when the fight gets hard, because there definitely can be trying moments in this conversation.
Palmer, your example and your advocacy is invaluable, and we're so grateful to be able to have you on the team at the ERLC, and so grateful to know you and all the ways that the Lord is using you. So we have sprung a surprise question on you. So it's a bonus question. And then we'll move into another question. But we just realized as we were talking before we started recording, you're actually the first person we've had on the podcast who has had COVID-19 and come out on the other side of it. So can you just give us an insight into what that was like, how it affected your family, and any post-COVID stuff that you've had to deal with?
Sure. So my family, all 5 of us, my husband, myself, and our 3 little boys, all got COVID at the beginning of March. And we were exposed at an event at my oldest son's school. And that night, 50 of our friends all became positive in what was a super spreader event. So we didn't realize that we were sick for about a week after we were exposed, and it was super early in the pandemic as far as the states go. So there wasn't a lot of information out there. Testing had not been ramped up. So there was a significant week of time when we were acting normal, going to work, going about our business, and then we started to get symptoms, and that prompted us to finally get tested. And some of the symptoms that we had, my husband lost his taste and smell, this was before that was really known to be a symptom. And then he had a pretty dry cough that got progressively worse. I had, on the other hand, a completely different set of symptoms. Mine were much more cardiovascular, of feeling like I couldn't breathe, rapid heart rate, blood pressure that was really, really off. And then my children had fevers and sore throats. And my husband and I never had fevers. So it was amazing to see the way that the virus manifests so differently in each of us. But we are so thankful and just praise God that we came through it. And it was a tough couple of weeks having mom and dad sick and the babies sick. But thankfully, we, have healed. My husband still has some cough and potentially some lung scarring. But we are grateful that we all are relatively healthy, got to go through it, and now hopefully have a little bit of antibody protection, though every day I feel like the research on antibodies changes. But it was a scary couple of weeks, but thankfully we got to do it together, and we're all quarantined, and we had a lot of friends who were going through the same thing, so we could kind of bounce our symptoms off one another. And we have an amazing research facility at Vanderbilt here in Nashville that's doing incredible COVID research. And so we've actually, all 5 of us are in a research study where they send their researchers out to our house once a week to get blood and nasal swabs. So they're really trying to innovate and figure out new ways to treat the disease. And my husband's been able to donate plasma to the ICU patients over at Vanderbilt to try to help with some of their care. So it was definitely a hard couple of weeks or months, but we're thankful to be on the other side of it.
Well, Palmer, we are so thankful that your family has come through that ordeal successfully. And we know there's a lot of folks out there who have dealt with this virus or know someone who has. And my hope is that everyone will be able to arrive at a successful conclusion like y'all have. Okay, so for our final question, you and your husband, Joseph, y'all create fun wherever you go, and you love to travel. What has been one of your most favorite trips, and which one of your trips would you absolutely recommend to our listeners, when things are actually back to normal and we can all leave our house, which, we'll be able to do that again in 2023?
Right. Yes. I love this question. Gosh, traveling is one of my favorite things in the whole world. And it's funny because I had always traveled a lot, but my husband hadn't. And so when we started dating, I kind of made that a prereq of, just so you know, you have to be okay with traveling. You have to be ready for all my crazy adventures that I want to take us on. And he was very game, which was great. So I will say my favorite trip, probably our honeymoon. So we went on an 8-week epic honeymoon, only because it was in between summers of law school. And so we knew that we probably weren't going to have that sort of time on our hands to get to just go and explore the world together. And so we did, and we went to Europe. But my favorite part is that I found $200 round trip tickets from Paris to Johannesburg. And I had lived in Africa for a couple of years before we dated. And so I really wanted to show Joseph kind of where I had lived and my heartbeat and the kiddos that I had gotten to serve there. And so we got to do it because we found these cheap tickets. So we spent about 5 weeks in Africa at the orphanage where I had lived, and he got to meet all of my sweet friends and kiddos there. And then we went on safari for a week, and it was magical and was just such a neat way to get to start off a marriage. So yeah, it was a very epic trip. During quarantine, we've actually, because we are 5 million% extroverts and needed to get out of the house, but to do so in a safe manner, we've actually been exploring a lot of the Tennessee state parks. And plug for Tennessee, apparently we have like the #1 ranked state park system in the country. We've been doing a lot of little day trips to hike around or overnight camping trips. So if you're looking for something fun to do in the midst of quarantine and you need to get outside, that has been a really great way for our boys to just get that energy out so that they don't tear my house down. But I will say, if you're looking for an adventure post-quarantine, we did a road trip in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine a couple of Augusts ago, and it was so fun. It was a great time to be up there because it was 1,000,000 degrees in the south, but just felt so lovely in the Northeast. And we found these little old amusement parks called Santa's Village and I think Storytime Village. I can't remember, but they're these 1960s amusement parks that are tiny and hilarious and so fun. So if you're looking for just a great American road trip, I recommend New England in the summer.
That's right. Well, Tennessee state parks, you're absolutely right. They can't be beat. And you mentioned a safari. I am sure that our listeners would agree that our ERLC podcast can sometimes turn into a safari-like experience.
I love it. I am a big fan of your all's podcast and listen every week. So I agree. There is a safari element to it every week.
Well, Palmer, as always, it's fun to talk to you. We are really glad to have you with us on the podcast today. But thanks so much for taking the time to spend a few minutes with us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So now it's time for the lunchroom, where every week we tell you about the things we've been talking about with one another. Lindsay, you're up first this week. What's on your mind?
Okay, so I found several things on the interwebs that I just had to share. First off is this so-called stairway. Some people call it the stairway. Some people call it the ladder to heaven in Austria that people climb. And you have to go and click on this link and see it because it is frightening. It's made out of steel cables. And it is 43 meters long, which because I live in America and was born here, I don't know how to do the conversions. So I don't know how many feet that is. And it's stretched, as they say, stretched over an abyss some 700 meters below, which means very, very high up. So if you watch it, I would like to know if y'all would climb it.
No, I would not. I would not do that at all.
Me either. I have a thing about heights, and even if I'm attached to something, no way, Jose. I like there to be solid ground beneath.
I don't have a thing about heights. I don't have a thing about heights. I just wouldn't do that.
You have a thing about safety. I don't know. I think that it's the kind of thing that I would probably do. Like, so when I hang out with Enneagram 7s, like this would never be my idea. But if I was around a 7 who was just like, oh, let's go do it, I'd probably like, okay, let's give it a shot.
Okay, so the next thing I have is Shane and Shane. They just come out with a vintage album with songs like Lord, I Lift Your Name on High, Ancient of Days. You have to be a certain age range to appreciate these songs, but they have got some awesome ones on there. And so I would highly recommend that. And then finally, you must listen to this amazing vocal performance by a lady named Callie Day. And she was actually on America's Got Talent, but that's not what made this go viral. It was viral before that, but she sings Hear My Prayer, which I hadn't heard this song before, but it is amazing. And I hope that in the new heavens and the new earth, I have a voice like this.
Lindsay, that's some pretty high praise.
Oh, well, once you watch it, you'll understand.
Got it. Well, for my lunchroom this week, I've been on vacation, as I mentioned, and so I've just spent, some time mindlessly scrolling through the internet, and there are several things that I came upon. One was a post that said, if 2020 were nachos, and then it shows saltine crackers with like that gross Kraft Singles cheese melted on top of them, and it just looks absolutely disgusting, which honestly perfectly sums up this year. You look at it, it's just utter disappointment. Nachos, who doesn't love nachos? This, no one wants this. And in the same way, I saw something that was not related to 2020, but was this, it looked like a smoked ham and it looked delicious. And there's this video floating around about the smoked ham that looks delicious when you first look at it, and they're kind of like throwing the juices back up on it. And it looks just, absolutely like something you would want to eat. But then they cut into it and it's not cake, it's smoked watermelon. And it just, like utterly disappointing. It's one of those, I saw one of those cut it open and it's cake, but it looked like steak. And I was like, yeah, I'd rather have steak than the cake. But anyway, this would be like, hey, who wants to have this delicious smoked ham except, oh, just kidding, it's watermelon. Yes. So anyway, disappointing things on the internet.
It was a terrifying sight. And it just reminded me of our fallen nature.
It looks like a blob of smoked flesh.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So for my lunchroom piece, I want to give a hat tip to Pastor Ray Ortland, who actually was the first person to put this on my radar. But what a heartwarming story here. A 6-year-old Wyoming boy is being hailed as a little hero after he survived multiple dog bites while trying to save his younger sister from a very aggressive dog out in Wyoming. Well, his aunt in an Instagram post was hailing the 6-year-old boy, Bridger Walker, and I can tell you, he's a real American hero.
And, I've seen an update on this since it's taken off as far as on social media, and Captain America, Chris Evans, sent him a message, and it shows Bridger watching the video with his sister while dressed in his Captain America outfit. So super cute.
See, this is what I'm talking about. This is the kind of stuff that needs to go viral in America. Not eggplant cakes, not fleshy watermelons, 6-year-olds who are saving the lives of their sisters. That's what's got to go viral. We can do this, America.
I just want to offer a full endorsement that this is the kind of quality material that we need. And thank God for this kid who saved his sister's life and put himself in front of her when this dog was attacking. How incredible. And how good of Captain America to take the time to send him a video. I mean, really, what boy wouldn't want that? You can find links to all the things we talked about today in the show notes. And if you like the podcast, please, as always, consider helping us spread the word by sharing this episode on social media or going into your podcast app and leaving us a rating or a brief review. But for Brent, Lindsay, and myself, we want to say thanks for listening, and we will be back next week with more content.